So I tweeted out earlier this week that as a former resident of Cairo, lived in Egypt for a few years, the street scenes are just really tragic. I mean, this is an Egypt that I don't think any of us who lived there when I did in the 80s could have imagined. I mean, there was tension a little bit between Islamists and the military, but it was a fairly gentle place. And now it's kind of totally blown up. And I think the other thing that's most striking to me is that I've never seen in our lifetimes, or at least since the early 70s, a period in which U.S. influence in Egypt was so low. I mean, President Obama had to come out this week and essentially say, we wish that violence would stop in Egypt, but it's really the problem of the Egyptians, and we can't really control it. It was pretty striking.
Do you think the president is now going to be accused of miscalculating, that if he had cut off aid to Egypt, which is substantial, when the military coup occurred, that maybe this wouldn't have happened?
That is out there now already. In fact, I think Senator John McCain is already starting to say this, that we should have stood up for what was right at the beginning, and that would have gotten the attention of the military. But to be fair to the president, the calculation he made is the one that the Israelis and the Saudis, among others, were urging upon him, which was maintain your influence, keep the aid flowing, keep good relations with the military. That's the only way you'll have any leverage, and that's the only way your voice will be heard. So that was the path the president took. We'll express unhappiness, but we'll keep ties alive and vibrant, and that will give us some influence with the military. Well, it turns out it didn't give him much influence with the military, and now he's between a rock and a hard place. He's going to have, he's had to anger the military leadership in Cairo by speaking out so strongly against what's happened in the streets this week. I don't think he had any choice on that. But at the same time, you know, he's basically convinced both sides that the U.S. is for the other party. The Morsi supporters think we didn't support them. The Army thinks we've betrayed them. And there's going to be pressure at home to cut aid anyway. So he's got no good options left.
Yeah, and for Americans in the bleacher seat, these scenes in Cairo were just even more confusing, because it was hard enough for your average American to figure out who were the good guys and who were the bad guys. And for many, many years, Egypt was the sort of bulwark of stability in the Middle East, and you know, it was clear kind of who our friends and foes were. But now it's really hard. And I don't think President Obama has helped Americans figure out you know, where our interest lies here.
Because I'm not sure that the White House knows where our interests lie at this point. Their interests lie in, you know, a stable democratic Egypt, but that's fine. But how do you get from here to there? What's the best path?
Is he going to get a lot of grief from Congress when they come back on this?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, you talk about people who don't know kind of who our friends or foes are. There are a lot of members of Congress who don't. But I mean, John McCain has already, as you said, started talking about, well, maybe, you know, Egypt shouldn't, we should cut off U.S. aid to Egypt, which is a really big chunk of change. That would be a big change. And, you know, the other thing is Congress.
But the realpolitik folks in Congress are going to say the opposite. They're going to say what the Saudis and the Israelis and to some extent the Europeans say, which is, you know, keep the lines open so that you can have some communication and have some influence. So there's not going to be a consensus view in Congress on that.
Right, right. And
especially if the Israelis are pushing to keep the aid going.
Yes, they're probably the most important lobbyists on Capitol Hill in this question.
Is aid the last lever, or are there other levers that the government can work to exert influence?
I don't think there are many levers left. That's the problem. I mean, there was what Americans think was a big deal in Egypt for a long time out in the street, and right now that doesn't matter so much because, as I said, everybody thinks the Americans are against them. The Morsi supporters think that they've been too sympathetic to the military because we kept aid going. The military thinks we bailed out on them, and this statement the president made this week pretty harshly condemning the attempt to end the sit-ins, that's going to convince the military that we're not for them either. And so I don't think there are a lot of levers. It's really striking. The Saudis write much bigger aid checks these days to the Egyptian government than the Americans do. And so with money goes influence. And I think we've lost a fair amount of it.